swastika is a very ancient and auspicious symbol for over 2 billion people in the world. I mean, that's a staggering number, and that's not going to go away. So it's really important that everyone comes to an understanding of what these symbols are, what are the right ways to talk about it, and what this means to different people, and to engage in a respectful conversation so that we can all come to understand each other better and arrive at a better place. Some definitions that are important to remember is obviously the word swastika. When we talk about it in the context of our presentation, we strictly mean the Sanskrit word swastika, astika, which means that which brings good luck, well-being, and it is important to multiple dharmic traditions, not just Hindus, but Jains, Buddhists, and as my presentation will show, to many other cultures across the world. The term swasti is a very ancient one. It occurs in the Vedas, in many other ancient Hindu scriptures, and it has many meanings, but all of them positive: good luck, prosperity, auspiciousness, good start, luck. And it is revered, as I said, by many different faiths. On the other side, you have what we call the Hakenkreuz, and the Hakenkreuz is a German word which translates to hooked cross. It was a symbol designed specifically by Hitler. He actually writes about how he designed this symbol in the Mein Kampf, and it was used by the Hakenkreuz was used by the Nazis extensively during the years that they were ruling Germany, and it fronted many horrors of the Holocaust, as we've said before. And we fully acknowledge that to the Jewish people and those many other communities, the Roma and the homosexuals and others who were targets of that pogrom, that Hakenkreuz represents genocidal evil, and it continues to represent that evil today because it was responsible for the extermination of over 6 million Jews, 1 million Roma, and other people. It brings fear and trauma in the pain and hearts of these communities even today. But the swastika has been in use for at least 10,000 years. Many Indian viewers are familiar with the swastika and wonder why this even needs any explanation. But when we live in the West, which is where I'm living and where a lot of these laws and definitions and conversations are framed, there is actually widespread ignorance of this term. And when I show some of these images, people are shocked. I showed this to some California lawmakers, and one of them actually said, okay, I'm getting triggered because this, even though you're telling me, I'm actually getting triggered and I don't really understand what's going on. So we try to show that when a symbol, and even within India, there's some confusion because people say, oh, the Nazi one was this facing and ours is the other facing, and ours is red and theirs is black. We show these images to show that, look, when a symbol is used by 1 billion Hindus, it gets used in many different ways. Yes, primarily it faces one way and primarily it's red and many people use dots. But as you can see, right, somebody put a little black swastika made out of kajal on their kid's head. So you can't always say it should be red. This mandir actually has the swastika tilted. Don't go by that. Just help understand the differences in the words. And what I discovered just on this trip to India is that there is a little swastika clay tablet from the Indus Valley civilization in the National Museum right here in Delhi. So that's how ancient this symbol is for us, but I won't belabor this point because everybody knows what the swastika is in India. But it's also very common in Southeast Asia, Japan, China, and in Japan it is known by other terms. It's most famously known as the manji, and you immediately start to see why we talk about context, because you can see the manji actually starts to look a lot more similar to the German Hakenkreuz because it's tilted, it's facing the other way, it's often done in black or green or whatever. But you can see that it's always used in a very, it's on the heart of the Buddha, it's in places that are kind of very similar: good luck, auspiciousness, bringing. But beyond that, this is where I think the story starts to get interesting, because I think what we need to understand is this symbol is a truly global symbol and a truly historical one, because you find it not just in the Asian cultures that I just described, but you find it in the Native American cultures of the Americas. And if you look at this little picture that I have on the screen of this little pin cushion, with the swastika, or what looks like a swastika embroidered on it. This is actually in the the National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. And it's a Mohawk pin, it's a pin cushion from the Mohawk tribe from about 150 years ago. And you see a lot of beautiful rugs where this symbol comes over and over again, and a sacred drum where they have this symbol. And the Native American tribes called it the whirling log. Europe actually had a long and ancient tradition of using what looked like this symbol prior to World War II. And, we can go on and on, but like you'll see it on ancient Greek helmets and sculptures from 300 BCE. You see it in the presidents, the Finland president. You used to see it on different military equipment. You see it in different old carvings, old floors. So it was very common in Europe too, again by different names, different cultures had different names. Africa and the Middle East, you will find a lot of medieval churches where this symbol has been used in the sacred artifacts that they use, in their building, masonry, etc. Iran, you can see in Africa, there was a tribe that used to actually tattoo it onto their backs. Truly global symbol. That's one thing to really remember, because today it's sacred to 2 billion, but through history it has been used by many, many, many more cultures, which maybe it not be so popular today. And Israel and the surrounding areas, the swastika, or the symbol that looks like the swastika, has been found in ancient synagogues. It has been found in ancient churches in Jordan, in the Tower of David, in lots of different places. So something about this symbol has really appealed to human groups all over the world through history. And that is why it is so important to keep that context in mind as we look at what happened in the last 150 years in Europe. And at the turn of the 20th century, there was a resurgence of interest in this symbol, and it became popular in Europe and North America by the word swastika. And you started to see it used a lot in building design and architecture, but also just for fun symbols, like Coca-Cola would issue like little good luck tokens with a swastika on it. The Jewish business handed out good luck tokens with swastika on it. Some fruit company called themselves a swastika. There was a football team that put swastika on this. So it was just seen as a general symbol of good luck, and why not? Great for and even today there are places in US that are named for the swastika that have survived several rounds of name changing. So what happened, right? How did we get from a place where such a beloved and widely used symbol has become now known as a symbol of hate? There are continuing costs to this misinterpretation. This cost is obviously most evident in the West, and I'll talk, because we have had to curtail our, how we practice our religion, how we practice our faith. Everybody is familiar with the kar puja that people get done. In the West, some mandirs, the poor priests, they make you open the cover of the bonnet, and they'll put the swastika on the hot engine inside, because if they put it on the car, then there's a danger that your car will get vandalized, and sometimes they'll end up singeing their fingers or something because the engine is still hot. So there's a lot of stuff that we face in our day-to-day lives, but let's start with a global problem that everybody faces, right? Including all the viewers of Sangam Talks who live here in India, who might be wondering, why should I care about all of this? My life in India is fine. I can put swastika all over the place and nobody's coming to get me. Encourage all of you to go to Google. And if you go to the Google Translate and do a German to English translation, and if you type Haken in there, you'll get the word hooked. If you type the word cruel, you'll get cross. But if you type the word Hakenkreuz, Google will suddenly spit out the word Nazi swastika. So you can see that even in India, you are being subject to misinformation, despite all the wide knowledge about the sacredness of the swastika, and despite the hundreds of thousands of Indian Hindu engineers who work in Google India and Google USA. So no, you in India are not exempt from this, because what happens online, it goes on to feed AI engines. If you look at AI, they are already giving you flawed answers on what a Hakenkreuz versus swastika is, and the situation will only get worse if not tackled. But let's look at real life impact that this misunderstanding has on people living in the West today. Let's look at the Native Americans. The Native Americans continue to get targeted back in 1940, the tribes had to sign an agreement saying that, we agree to give up our sacred symbol because the Nazis have cooperated. Think about how unfair that is for a group of people who had already been genocided out of existence and, lost their land, lost their religion, lost everything, and then they had to give up their sacred symbol too. And even today, right, if somebody goes to sell an old historical artifact from the Native American tribes, sometimes there'll be a whirling log on it. And then this poor guy who's from a Native American tribe gets targeted as a neo-Nazi. How ironic is that? And how terrible it is that a group that faced such a terrible genocide is even now not allowed to freely use this sacred symbol. Let's look at the Jains, a micro minority in India, certainly in every Western country that they live in. If you just Google sacred symbols of the Jains, you will find that everywhere in the world, their sacred symbol incorporates the swastika. Except in North America. There, the Jain Association of North America, because they are so tiny and because they are so scared of using this symbol, they actually changed their religious rituals and put a different symbol. I also like to just bring up the example for Indians, right? Every year, hundreds of thousands of Indian students head to US and Western universities to start new exciting, lives as students or start new jobs. You might be carrying a little artifact, a little puja equipment, a little murti that has a swastika on it. You go put it in your room, and your roommate walks in and has no context and gets horrified as to that, he or she has been paired with a neo-Nazi. So you really want to make sure that people in the West understand that this symbol has multiple meanings, multiple names, and they need to look at context to understand what they're looking at. Because already Indians who live in the West face this problem all the time. We have had, on Diwali, you'll do a rangoli, very likely to have a swastika on it, or you put up a little Ganesh entry thing in your entryway, very likely to have swastika on it. So, you have the delivery men who get angry, handymen who walk out because, they're like, hey, I'm not going to be working in the house that is inhabited by a Nazi, because they have no idea that this symbol could have multiple meanings. They have very linear dimensions of it. There was a Jewish student who came to India and understood the context, took a swastika, Hindu swastika, back to his dorm and wanted to use as an educational tool. Instead, the poor guy got hounded and had to apologize and stop that whole process. In the Bay Area in California, where I live, a summer camp which had a swastika that was Japanese in origin and had been installed in the building at the start of the 20th century, meaning a couple of decades before the rise of Hitler. That building had to shut down its summer camp and remove that historical symbol because, the camp counselors just freaked out. They're like, oh my God, this is an unsafe place. We're not going to work here. So the problem is actually getting worse, not better. So for all the people who say, wait for time to pass, I always tell them, if you don't tackle a problem now, kicking the can down the road makes it worse and not better. So, this symbol we need education on this symbol just so that people can continue to live lives with full freedom of religion. Now, from a dharmic perspective, from people who care about India, Indian history and Indian culture, the more you allow this misunderstanding to flourish, the more you open the way for Hindu-phobic historians and academicians and media people with an agenda to grind, to create a conflation between Hinduism and Nazism, which, as we have shown, literally did not exist. So you have our very own Audrey Truchke, who was actually talking about swastika in India, and notice the words that she used. So at times, swastika is used in a somewhat ambiguous sense. I'm sorry, but who uses the swastika in a negative way in India? It would actually make no sense, right? Supposing I want to wish death to somebody and I go draw a swastika on their door, the person will say, oh, thank you, you're wishing me good luck, right? So this whole tweet makes no sense, except when you see it as part of a larger trend, which we are now starting to see in the West over the last 5 to 10 years, of starting to very directly associate Hitler with Hinduism and Nazism as inspired by Hindus, which, something we heard during the infamous Dismantling Global Hindutva conference. So I think Indians and dharmic folks all over the world need to take back and really drive usage of the correct words. Otherwise, Hindu-phobic players and Hindu-phobic institutions will continue to make false connections between Hinduism and Nazism, as you see here. So you see here the website of a guy who's a white nationalist, Mark Major. He's a published author. He has a following of 100,000 people or more. So this is not a troll. This is a major figure on the white nationalist movement. And he, a couple of years ago, he was attacking the construction of a Hindu temple in Texas. And what does he do? He doesn't bring up zoning issues or anything else, right? He starts to create hate for that temple by saying, oh, when Hitler and Nazis were looking for ways to get inspired, they didn't look to the church, which we know they did. They went all the way to India to get inspired, and they brought the swastika from there. So this sort of misinformation, these sort of tales will become bigger and bigger unless we, as those who love the swastika, those who use it, those who understand it, take the right steps and cut this terminology whenever we see it. Because Hitler used the Hakenkreuz. Hitler was inspired by the hooked cross, not by Hindus and swastikas. And there is expanding scope for more harm, as you see. So there's some people who are deliberately trying to create misinformation like the white nationalists, but then there are Jewish advocacy groups that are now basically associating not even the symbol but just the word swastika, and they are saying, hey, why is there a swastika? And that is what led to a slew of laws, which I'll talk about in a minute. There were actually laws that are being put in place now to ban the use of the word swastika, to ban the display of the symbol, and think about the impact that has on religious freedom. What is it that all of us can do about this, right? Change is underway, and we all need to understand and do our bit in growing it. Some of the hard work's already been done. Many people don't know this, but in 2007, there was a very high-level meeting that happened between some of the most senior rabbis in Israel and some of the most senior Hindu spiritual leaders, and it was called the Hindu-Jewish Summit. And at the end of it, the very senior Israeli Jewish spiritual leaders understood the issue, and they said, we understand the swastika has nothing to do with our pain and our terminology. Unfortunately, what happened is there was no work done to build on that proclamation, and so that proclamation sort of soon got forgotten. But a lot of the work at the highest spiritual leader level has been done, and now what do we need to do with it? Well, that's where organizations like CoHNA have been playing a major role in helping take this discussion forward and making sure that people in the places that matter know it. Then we are also very proud to be a founding partner with the Understanding Swastika multi-faith coalition that was created in 2022. Which brought together senior spiritual leaders from the Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, and Native American traditions, basically saying, we are now going to work to take our sacred symbol back, and we ask everyone to use the correct terminology. This is a wonderful alliance. Everybody needs to look them up, and everybody needs to make sure that their spiritual organizations join and further the work being done by this group.